Alright, guys, I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. Now, I want to start off the show by saying that my new book's now available, so that means that you can get all three books. That's Uneducated Guesses, How to Date an Antique Table, A Lover's Guide, and the brand new one, More You Know, which is a book of fake facts with illustrations. They're all available now as ebooks on Amazon, so you can get the three of them for £7.50. Whereas if you were bought them as paperback, it'd cost you about 30 quid for all three. And even when you spend 30 quid on them, I'd still only make probably about £3.20 at most off the three, like in total. So when you spend £7.50 on all three of them, I still make about £3.20, give or take a couple pennies. And I'm happy with that, innit? Like, more money in my pocket, well, the same amount of money in my pocket, but more money in your pocket, which I think is better for everyone, realistically, isn't it? Anyway, we'll get into this week's show. It kind of links, hopefully, anyway. At this point, it kind of links with tomorrow's episode of Truth Seeking with Jimmy Budd at 7 o'clock live on Threshold FM. And if you're listening to this in the future, then listen to Truth Seeking. It'll be linking to the vampire episode, but. It kind of links to last week's as well, though, to be fair, because last week we spoke about the Royals, so it kind of links to this. Anyway, I better tell you what it's about. It's about dinosaurs, mate. And it's believed that dinosaurs, like we know, well, we take it as a fact, innit, that they all died out 66 million years ago from a meteorite or a meteor. I forget which one's the one that hits planets, but. Except though it didn't wipe them all out, some survived and they went on to slowly evolve into less formidable foes for the human that followed millions of years later, the human being us. Now, these survivors of the meteorite went on to become the birds that we know today. But if a massive carnivorous reptile can transform into a scavenging seagull or a fucking seed-eating pigeon, then why can't they also slowly develop into a humanoid creature? Amphibians and all, man, because fucking where do they come from? Amphibians, because most of them are just they're just wet lizards, innit? So they've got to come from dinosaurs as well. But we're made to believe that they all turned into birds. But you can't look at me in the eye and tell me that a newt doesn't somehow resemble a crocodile, like a smooth-skinned crocodile. Now, I've always had my doubts about dinosaurs because they just seem too perfect, innit? They're cool looking, they're interesting, there's fucking loads of them to know about as well, so you can collect information on them all and know all the names and that, like Stegosaurus, Triceratops, Pentosaurus, Brachiosaurus. I'm not going to list more. Diplodocus, why not? Show off me bit of knowledge that I've gotten from playing that Jurassic Park game on PS2 and the new one that's pretty much the same. Anyway, they're also like suspiciously old as well. They're old enough to be pointless to lie about, but somehow recent enough to be relevant to our lives today. But where are they all? Like, why did they shrink? Did the Earth used to be bigger? There was supposedly billions of dinosaurs knocking about at any given time, but a lot of them were bigger than houses. And yeah, I know that there's billions of houses in the world in one way or another today, but unless you live in that stretch of America where they get loads of hurricanes, then your house is pretty much static, innit? It stays where you leave it. They're not walking around grazing or hunting, because I've always thought that if something moves about, then realistically, if something moves about, it takes up more space, innit? If you get what I mean, because, like, look at what the Dutch do with calves. Like, you get Dutch calves liver. Like, sure, you could have 30 calves knocking about with the mums in a field, but if we ram each one of these into a cage and then fill that same field with a building full of cages, we can easily get fucking hundreds of the same thing in the same space. So it makes sense that the Earth was bigger at some point, maybe before all the water appeared, possibly, but what if all that water was inside the Earth and somehow an intelligent race of dinosaur were able to siphon the water out of the hollow inside of the Earth, and then the gravity of the planet kept the water there? Then, using the massive muscles of these creatures, they sculpted the coasts to keep the water away from all the holes. What holes, Jack, you ask? I know that's what you're probably thinking to yourself, but What about all these sinkholes, mate, that you keep seeing on the news and on Channel 5? Maybe these sinkholes are just there because they're the little holes in, like, the fascia of the planet. Like, underneath the ground, like the fascia, like, you know, them boards you put up when you underneath your guttering on your house looks a bit shit. So to make your house look nice, you put fascia boards over it. Maybe that's where the sinkholes are coming from. Someone clever somewhere has just made, like, our floor to cover up the holes in the ground where the dinosaurs escaped to. And underneath the ground is just a big hole. But if you, like, put it another way, if you lived on top of a house, right? Think about you living on top of your house now, and you've lived up there all your life, you would never even imagine that there's a big hole underneath the roof tiles before you even reach the first, like, the floor that you'd reach, like the loft, the inside of the loft. There's that big gap in it. So why can't we use that same logic with sinkholes? Anyway, let's get into the dinosaurs, because that's not really it's not really going anywhere, innit? So now, I know that some people say that not all ancient giant lizards are dinosaurs, but because of the time period that they came from. But it's for the sake of this show. That's what I mean by dinosaurs. By dinosaur, I mean just like the massive fucking lizards that existed at some point. Like, not the ones that were from, not the specifically Jurassic, not specifically Triassic, Cretaceous, you know. Overall, the whole fucking thing are massive monsters. Reptilian monsters, anyway. So, I guess we'll start the show now by recapping what we already know about them. So we know that a cataclysmic event happened approximately 66 million years ago, believed by many to be a meteorite that struck the Earth. It set the sky on fire and forever changed the chemical makeup on Earth, meaning there was potentially more oxygen in the atmosphere, which in turn allowed for new species to appear on the Earth. Now, I've always wondered if mammals and dinosaurs were so big, like the giant sloth and that, and the T-Rex. Well, were they so big because they needed the extra lung space to be able to get as much oxygen as they needed from the atmosphere? But if that is the case, that sort of implies there was a long time before the meteorite where the Earth had an abundance of oxygen at some point. Because if you believe in evolution, then I guess you need to believe that the giant dinosaurs and other monstrous beasts were a lot smaller at one point in time, and then they slowly had to evolve into a larger species as oxygen became scarcer. But if you believe that, then you've got to wonder, where did all the trees go? Or all the algae? Or all the grass? If photosynthesis is real, then plants create oxygen by using carbon dioxide to survive, but this makes it all seem like photosynthesis used to produce something instead of oxygen, or something alongside oxygen and glucose. More than likely, it made whatever this extra element was in abundance too. Now, unfortunately, I don't know what that other chemical was. Maybe nitrogen, possibly, because there's fucking loads of that about. And speaking of nitrogen, fucking what's using that? What's breathing in all the nitrogen in the air? What's the point of that? If everything has evolved to make the most of the planet slowly over billions of years, like we're led to believe by people like Charles Darwin and that, then what uses gaseous nitrogen? I know a lot of, like, tomatoes and nettles, for example, grow a lot better, when there's more nitrates in the soil, but surely something must be breathing in that nitrogen. So what if something or someone is trying to squeeze the oxygen out of the atmosphere? Maybe the dinosaurs got so big because there was so much oxygen available, so by removing the oxygen, it could be a way to control the size things grow to, and to limit the general lifespan, maybe. But if that's true, then why do elephants and giraffes knock about? Like, why do they exist if that's true? And speaking of elephants, there's supposedly a dinosaur that lives in the Congo. I'm not sure which Congo, but let's just say the Congo, because realistically it should just be the Congo, shouldn't it? I don't think it should be the French Congo and the Dutch Congo and whatever other denomination of Congo there are. It's just the Congo. Either way, there's some fucking massive dinosaur that supposedly knocks about in there. And when you hear the description of it, though, because it just kind of sounds a lot like an elephant, because it's grey, it's got a large body and a long appendage coming out near the mouth. So that's pretty much an elephant. Maybe it's just an elephant without ears. Maybe it ripped its ears off, or it's a species of elephant without the big ears. Maybe they've got another way to cool themselves down because they came from dinosaurs, mate. Because they're fucking cold-blooded. They don't need the big ears. Maybe it's a reptilian form of elephant. Who are we to judge? And whilst we're just still in the grasps of setting up the show, I've always wondered if they just have dinosaurs backwards. When they show you the fossils and that, like those long necks, they could easily just be tails, innit? Like maybe necks came about through millions of years of evolution. Because surely a neck's the easiest thing to imagine appearing through evolution. It's hard to imagine that, an extra eye would form, like we all had one eye as a creature, and then suddenly we had two eyes and they were better. Like that's hard to believe that an extra eye would just sprout out of nothingness. But the idea of a neck, like the whole idea behind the giraffe is that the neck kept growing longer and longer, and those ones could survive because they could reach higher up in the trees where there was less food below, so they would survive and pass on their genetics. So it's not too out there to imagine that a neck is the thing that came about through evolution, because it moves the head further away from the lungs as well, meaning potentially you can take a bigger breath, or that the air is inside you for longer, being used for longer, maybe in your throat and that, I don't know. Maybe for digestive purposes though as well, a neck, it gives the amylase in your mouth longer to react with the food rather than just having a face built into the shoulders. And if you think about it though, these stunted looking creatures would help to be able to explain to us why we have shoulder blades as well, because shoulder blades seem to have no real reason to have the blade part unless they used to be used to protect the smaller reptilian brain, or the R brain that some scientists call it, that first bit of brain that reptiles had, and then other species slowly evolved the other bits of brain as we evolved away from reptiles supposedly. But is that just a way to try and demonise reptiles and play them down so they don't seem as intimidating, so people don't think that there's a reptilian race, of invisible creatures, or of invisible reptilians lurking, in the shadows and that? And maybe it's just a way to make people think snakes are stupid. I don't know. But we're getting fucking well ahead of ourselves here. Now, I know you're probably thinking there'd be no one that would want to spread lies about dinosaurs or spread lies about who's trying to control the oxygen, but what if it's the usual suspects that are trying to control all this? Now, according to Eric DeBay, that's exactly who it is. Now, here's a quote from AtlanteanConspiracy.com. National Geographic and the Ice Age movies were produced by Mason Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation and 20th Century Fox. The Masonic production company, Universal Studios, created Jurassic Park and The Land Before Time. They are owned by Comcast, whose main shareholders are Masons, J.P. Morgan and the Rothschilds. Discovery Channel, which features many dinosaur documentaries, is also financially advised by N.M. Rothschild and Sons Limited. Now, that's a quote there from Eric DeBay. They're obviously not my thoughts. I haven't looked into that side of anything, ever, really. But I just thought, it gives you an idea of potentially who could be pushing for the lies to be spread. Anyway, that's an allegation there of who's trying to convince us that the dinosaurs exist. But what about the people who want us to not believe in the lizards? Now, there's one group that goes by the name of Young Earth Creationists, which it's not the Young Earth Creationist in the sense of like the Hitler Youth, but young as in the Earth itself is young. Specifically, 6,025 years old as of today in 2021, meaning the Earth and all of its life came into existence in 4004 BC. So a bit of an odd age. Like weird, but and according to a survey as well that I found a survey, and in 1985 there were 700 American scientists that believed that this is how the world came into fruition through some form of unfathomable deity that we call God, as like a Catholic and that. But that's but that unfathomable deity is it's impossible to imagine. Yet we're created in its image, so we presume it looks like us. Now that's 700 people out of 480,000 people. Fossils, though, like where did they come from? Well, according to the YECs, they were made by the devil, and they were put there to distort the image of God in the eye of the public, which is much easier than explaining how fossils are actually made by stone and ground sedimenting over itself in layers to then somehow be filled with water that rots down the minerals in there and leaves a fossil, and that gets swapped out for stone like a weird magic trick. So I can see why they do think the devil's involved. But all of this begs another question, for me it does anyway. Now, does that mean that the devil is more powerful than God? The YEC, the young earth creationists, believe nothing has changed in the past 6,000 years, even though they believe in the Great Flood, so which would make for a huge geological change, because all of a sudden there'd be fucking water everywhere. But ignoring that, they must believe the devil is more powerful than God, because it means that the devil can alter and add to the perfect, unchangeable landscape that God itself created. And I found another statistic which I thought was good. Well, maybe not good, but interesting, It claims that 40% of Americans believe that God created everything and that there was no Big Bang at all, and all of the science behind that is a lie. So, according to what I've been reading as well, I looked into this bit, only 16% of British people, though, believe in creationism. So, questions. Does that mean the British people are indoctrinated further, or are we freer to believe what we want? So are we indoctrinated further into science than America is, or are we just freer to believe and think whatever we want to think and believe? It's not something we'll ever know, though, really, because unfortunately people lie, innit? So we won't be able to really figure that one out. If you're listening to this and you think to yourself, quite like this, maybe you'd like to see what I make out of dead rats as well, mate. There's a link below in the description. Wherever you're listening to this, you should find a link anyway, a link tree. If not, just search World Around You, the name of the podcast, and you'll find all me on all my socials and that, mate. Give a little go of threshold.fm as well. You'll find loads of different radio shows there by loads of different people. Anyway, thanks for listening, man. I'll let you get back to your show. Right, so there's one guy, right, called Gregory Erickson, and he believes that dinosaurs only died out because their eggs started to take too long to hatch, as this would mean that the species of dinosaur that accompanied their eggs during gestation would be more susceptible to an attack. But it kind of explains how reptiles such as turtles have survived this long though as well, because turtles tend to dump their eggs on beaches, in the hope that their young will move inland and actually make something of their lives and start taking part in society. But unfortunately, like humans in the past 40 years have started to interfere with the baby turtles and force these invading baby turtles back out to sea to live their lives until it's their turn to try and give their children an actual future in like mainstream society. So I also wonder if Greg believes, though, does Gregory Erickson, we'll call him Greg, first name turns Pally, does he believe in lizard people? Because it makes sense that the predatory species would be the ones to survive, as they'd have a really easy food source, in the eggs and in the weakened protective parents who haven't left the eggs for months, maybe years at a time. Except the predatory lizards may not have understood the concept of farming these species, but then as millions of years have passed and they've evolved, and maybe then they've passed on a potentially an initial oral history of themselves, and eventually then a written record on the importance of farming, from the lizards that survived, and as the brains evolved and grew from the R brain to the regular brains that we know today. And though these scaly lizards, could they be responsible for teaching humans about agriculture? Because I think it was in the giant episode a good few weeks back now that we learnt about Quetzalcoatl, who was known as the feathered serpent. So what if scientists of modern times have taken feathered serpent that's used to describe Quetzalcoatl and used that in order to tell and try and swap people to not let them know about these speaking lizards, but to then try and convince people that dinosaurs became birds because of feathered serpent. As time passed though, you have to presume that the protective parents watching over their eggs would somehow become harder to hunt due to defensive capabilities or strong senses. So because obviously they've survived, so they must be better at defending themselves. Maybe they're like an ankylosaurus. I think ankylosaurus implies it's part rabbit, but ankylosaurus, because they got the spikes on their tail in it and the big hard shell. They're quite defensive creatures. Or maybe like ones that would be harder to hunt would be like proper the tiny ones that are like the size of a chicken that were like quite quick, and you see like dozens of them at a time on Jurassic Park. Maybe them ones, maybe they could hide better or blend in better. So they'd pass on their genetics and they would live longer. I mean, I've just explained what evolution is to you in a really fucking backwards way, but it only makes sense though that if they're the ones that are surviving, the prey that's surviving is really defensive, then it only makes sense that the best hunters would have survived as well, and they'd be what passed on their genes, as they'd be the only ones to be able to get food for their young. But what about stopping their eggs from being eaten? Maybe it was a prehistoric technology that was able to stop the eggs from being eaten. Like maybe they developed like a form of like a canning system where they could have the egg, pop the egg out and then pop it in a tin, or maybe they built rocks around it or something, like very primitive because it's millions of years ago. But still, you get what I mean. But I doubt it. I doubt that it was prehistoric. I'm not gonna go out there, and say, oh, dinosaurs had prehistoric technology, because I doubt it. It does. That seems hard to believe. It feels a lot more likely that a primitive species of chameleon would have been the best hunter. Like I think there's Troodons. There was a Troodon, that's a type of dinosaur, and I think they were really fucking good hunters. Like they would use like the dead of night and they'd use it packs, and like they were like the fucking prime hunter. But anyway, like a primitive species of chameleon maybe, and or like a species that can blend or turn full on invisible. Maybe they've got light receptors in its scales, photosensitive scales, and then they could choose to refract the light around themselves. But maybe after like prolonged use of this ability, they started dying out due to the sunlight no longer warming the blood as much, so they wouldn't live as long because the sunlight's not actually hitting them, it's being bounced around them. So then they began to tunnel into warmer climates, like tunnel in, into the earth, to keep themselves warm in order to retain heat and hunt from below the earth, like fucking really vicious moles, which would explain the teeth that moles have. And I guess moles don't really need the arms either, because moles don't have arms. Their arms are sort of in the bodies. The bodies are like a fucking loose sock, and they got little hands on them. They got mental teeth. Anyway, so as these sort of tunneling primitive chameleons evolved, and as time passed, maybe they developed societies and entire civilizations underground. And if this seems difficult for you to believe, then you need to pull yourself aside and fucking give yourself a talking to, because if you believe that the advent of fucking twistable thumbs eventually led to vocal cords and better brains, then it's just as believable that specialist refractive scales could lead to the development of the hollow earth. I can link some of this together as well. It's not just, out of me fucking imagination. I can link some of it together from my research. So we've got a warmish place is in Peru, which is in South America, which is a continent said to be riddled with entrances to Agartha, the hollow earth, and loads of fucking UFO sightings, and UFO technology supposedly. Now, I think South America, I'm pretty sure, I think it has links to Quetzalcoatl, I think. But anyway, there's stories of these things that were called ICA stones, so Ica stones, and they're engraved with what look like modern day illustrations, depictions of dinosaurs. Now, while some heathens believe that these are a con by Peruvian farmers, you've also got the other side of the argument, which of the same argument, which is people basically look at these Ica stones quite negatively on both sides, which is weird. You'd think one side would be like, oh yeah, they're real, but realistic, like some of them believe, like people either think they're a con by Peruvian farmers, and then you've got the people that say, oh, I don't think it's a con by Peruvian farmers. These other people just don't believe, and it feels, like I say, it feels bigoted. I'm being very careful how I word this, but I don't think it's that bad to say, and it's purely from research. Like these other people believe that the Peruvian farmers were incapable of thinking up this idea in the 1960s. Like for some reason, 70 years ago, they couldn't have had the idea of drawing things on stones, which seems really like, just like mean's not a strong enough word, but like to say a whole country is incapable of drawing on a rock seems like a weird thing to suggest, but that's, from my evidence, that's what people seem to believe about them. Now, I've seen pictures of the stones. They're pretty cool, man. They look like a black stone most of the time, like a black mottled stone, like like the veneer that you put on your kitchen counter when you want to look a bit posher, or you just don't want to spend the money and just get a vinyl wrap on your kitchen. And then looks like that, but then like someone's got a key, and you know, like when you scratch your name into a rock when you're a kid, when you walk your dog with your parents or something, like, oh, write your name on there and we'll come back and show it you in, you know, in 15 years time, and you never come back because no one ever remembers it. And then it's like that, but scratched in with pictures of dinosaurs that look like cartoon drawings of dinosaurs. So what if they're capable of doing that? Because it's not long before the advent of dinosaurs, but I would say it's long before the advent of dinosaurs in mainstream media, in like TV and cartoons and films, at least in the like England, from going off what I've been reading in America. But they had these drawings, so what if they can visit the under the ground into the hollow earth, and they can see these things, or they just know that they're there. Like, even though, like, they're the same people that believe that the Peruvians are incapable of coming up with this idea in the 1960s, them same people believe that Europeans were capable of coming up with an entire dinosaur hoax back in the 1800s. But why even make the dinosaur hoax? I mean, some people say that there's a lot of money in dinosaurs. You got like the dinosaur rush, which supposedly made and is still making more money than the gold rush ever made, which makes me think the gold rush wasn't really about the gold, but it was more about moving people against their will without knowing it was against their will. So they moved loads of people from the east coast of America to the west coast of America, and by doing that developed trade routes and paths, and found, through trial and error, using hundreds of thousands of people, found the quickest routes where they could probably then lay down train tracks and capitalise on everyone else's research, kind of thing. And you never know, maybe someone will listen back to all these shows in a couple of years' time and capitalise off my research, you know, and be like, oh, this guy was really onto something here. But I reckon the dinosaur hoax could have been a really good way to measure the success of brainwashing in the society. Dinosaurs play a part in most children's lives, innit? Like, you teach the kids about God, but then in the same day you're teaching them about dinosaurs as well, and it plays to that whole cognitive dissonance that vegans spout about. Like, maybe that cognitive dissonance is pivotal in the plan of the ruling classes. If they can make people believe from a young age in two very conflicting ideologies, it'll make it easier to swap details throughout their lives. Think about like the Mandela effect, you know, and whilst they're planting these seeds of doubt in the intelligent children, that's a seed that will begin to grow as they get older, so that then when they begin to question reality just in time for when the hormones are taking over in secondary school, where, you know, obviously in secondary school as a kid you want to appear confident in it, yet instead of feeling confident you can't even decide whether you believe in giant lizards or whether you believe in Jesus, because realistically you've got to pick one or the other. Because, like, imagine how I think they do it because, I may have made this point before, but imagine how dangerous schools would actually be and should be. A school, a college, a university should be a fucking dangerous place for society, because potentially you've got loads of intelligent people, and if all these intelligent kids weren't second guessing themselves because their previous teachers mixed up reality and make believe for them, imagine what people could actually achieve, and what people could try to do, and the ideas people would have if they weren't having to pick between Jesus and lizards. You know, it's just bizarre, and it seems like a really good way, as I say, to measure if brainwashing is working. But, you know, maybe it's these conflating ideas though that have led people to believe that it was in fact aliens that destroyed the dinosaurs, and it's perfectly logical, innit? Because if you consider, like, let's say these kids are intelligent, so they've been told this is fact and this is fact, Jesus is fact, God is fact, God created the earth and that's fact, but there were dinosaurs as well. So you then need something to bridge the gap, let's say, to allow for both of their beliefs to be true. Now that's where aliens come into it, and because the aliens, albeit in this situation, aliens would have to strike with a perfectly timed missile or meteorite in order to both terraform the planet and wipe out most current inhabitants. And we know that a missile strike, we already know that a missile strike is a really good way to terraform a planet, a nuclear missile strike, because fucking Hank Scorpio told us about it in his plans for when he reaches Mars, you know, fucking Musk. The impact from the missile, though, for that hit the Earth to get rid of the dinosaurs, according to scientists anyway, that had a 30-second window to make the impact that it did, because it would have to hit shallow water in order to cause the effects that it caused, in order to wipe out the dinosaurs and change the chemical makeup of the Earth. So, it was either a perfectly executed plan, or they hit the wrong part of Earth, or it was a natural occurrence. It was always going to happen. But what if it was none of these things? What if the dinosaurs were intelligent? Like we're never told that they were intelligent, apart from on, I think it was literally called Dinosaurs, where they're like bipedal green guys with little horns and that, and they live underground. But like sticking in the world of reality rather than cartoons and TV shows, what if they were intelligent and in order to be able to move into the hollow earth, they found a sort of plug? Like imagine that the earth is a sink or a bathtub and the earth's surface is the drain pipe, so it's kind of inverted, because and that makes sense, doesn't it, to invert it all like that? Because a lot of people say that our world is currently in an inversion of itself. And I don't know why, I can't remember why, but supposedly everything's backwards at the minute, so it makes sense if you think like that. More importantly though, when you pull the plug out of a full bath, it causes what you would, if you lived in the bath, a cataclysmic event in the bath, because it causes a drought. And if you wiggle your finger or wiggle your dick or your tit, or your boob around the plug hole, it can cause that weird spiral as well, which in a naturally occurring flaw, that's got to be able to fucking like rip up sand and dirt and rocks, if that was to happen around that, in that area, which is probably why the paint flakes around your plug hole as well. Now, that would make a crater of sorts, because where the water washes away the surface and erodes the area as it's rushed into the Earth's surface from underneath. So if you imagine like somehow they've emptied out the water from inside the Earth onto the surface, and then as I said at the start, they've used their fucking proper big dinosaur muscles to build the coasts to keep the water away from where these holes are, these entrances. But then you've got a question of where's all that water come from? Well, we can answer this one by thinking about your bathroom as well, sticking in the bathroom. Scientists today say that the centre of the Earth is pretty hot. So, what if the water that filters through the soil from rain towards it filters through the soil, drips through, gets sucked up by the roots, like through the roots, but then the rest of it's got to keep going, hasn't it, because of gravity. So it keeps dropping down towards the centre of the Earth. Then it reaches the bottom of the soil and drips onto the core of the Earth, evaporates, and then builds up as in the gap between like the core and the crust, if you like. It gathers in that part there as steam. Now, that would possibly explain as well where the moon comes from, because that's a thing that, according to millions of people, shouldn't exist. Maybe the moon was a naturally formed plug over the steam hole of the world, but the dinosaurs managed to catapult it into the stratosphere, making it orbit the Earth to keep the liquid on the surface of the Earth, even constructing the orbit of the moon itself in order to control the flow of water in the tides, to keep the water away from the hole so that they don't get wiped out by the very water they removed coming back into the hole in the Earth. This could be fucking what spurred on our evolution, because there's fucking loads of oxygen in water, and now the sunlight is hitting the water, it could evaporate and change the atmospheric gases of the planet, so we don't even need the meteorite anymore. But I mean, it's just a hunch, innit? But based off me research, it seems possible, plausible at least. But putting aside the Jurassic uncloggers, if we focus on the aliens attacking the Earth, that could explain the radioactive nature of some dinosaur bones, at least according to experts, which brings up my own little theory though. Now, I've got my own little theory. We'll probably go into this in another episode. I probably will do an episode on curses and things like that, because that's fucking fascinating. But just to get just to lay the little fucking... I'm going to do what mainstream media does, guys. I'm going to give you a little drip feed here, get you going, so it's already in your head, so you think you've come up with the idea, mate. Fucking... Right. So my little theory about curses... Could ancient artefacts that are believed to be cursed, could they just be radioactive? And because that's a relatively new scientific finding, it was overlooked in ancient history, and the artefacts got hidden away, like sealed in these weird stone vaults. That could explain how having these cursed items made people stronger, or by having these cursed items made people become crazy and try and destroy things, because when they possess the artifact, they're getting radioactive poisoning, radiation sickness, and it's affecting their brains. But anyway, that's for this week anyway, unrelated. Something else, though, that got overlooked by scientists throughout history, dinosaurs. Like actual dinosaurs, because supposedly dinosaurs were invented. Now this shocked me, really fucking shocked me, it really did. 1842. Dinosaurs had never appeared before. No one had known about them. No one had even considered them. But 1842, they're invented. And realistically, though, I mean, a real dinosaur has never appeared. Supposedly, according to my research at least, which I'm not going to lie, some of it I'm doubting. I'm doubting some of it, but no one has ever found an intact dinosaur skeleton, like from tip to toe, well, from head to tip to tail, top to tail. From top to tail, no one's ever found like a full-on like dinosaur skeleton in it. So, and according to my research, no one has never found a real dinosaur head, like the skull. No one's ever found one. They don't exist. Like a real dinosaur skull don't exist, which is fucking mental, innit, really? Because everybody can imagine a dinosaur heads. Everyone. Like, you imagine a dinosaur head, dead easy. You think of like a fucking T-Rex or the picture on Jurassic Park or whatever. Like, that's like the universal idea for a dinosaur skull. But it's never existed. Like, the first which begs the question, like a Triceratops' head, mate. How could they possibly know a Triceratops had horns in its face if they've never found a skull of one? Where's that come from? Now, the first dinosaurs were allegedly discovered by, I'm probably going to butcher this name, Othniel Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. And obviously, straight from the names, I'm wondering if that's where we get the idea of drinking to cope because of Edward Cope's name. Because if he knew he was lying about all these dinosaurs, then it makes sense he would eventually turn to alcohol to survive, or maybe celebrate, depending on his obvious fucking sociopathic tendencies. Anyway, another weird point to make, that is, no one's ever found a dinosaur who wasn't already looking to find a dinosaur. And I mean, that it makes sense that through like research and due diligence that you'd be able to narrow down an area where you think you're going to find some dinosaurs. But think about all the foundations that have been dug all around the world, the building works that's happened, I think Japan for a while were cutting down mountains to extend the coastline. Didn't find any dinosaurs supposedly in doing that. Now, I mean, it does, in a way, you can imagine it, and it does make sense that no one's ever found a dinosaur that wasn't looking for one, because the people that are digging these holes have a job to do. Like, they're builders, innit? They're contractors and that. So, if you imagine you're building a new supermarket, you're building the fucking world around you are us, where you can go and get all of your taxidermy needs and weird books and whatever else I decide to sell in the future, coprolite, which is fossilised poo, which kind of fits in with the episode, I guess. But you're digging the foundations for your new supermarket, and you find a load of old bones, but you want to get paid, man. You're not going to get paid if you don't still work, are you? Like, you're going to not be on the job, which is then going to postpone the job, meaning your boss is going to look bad to whoever he took the contract on from, which could be another subcontractor, or it could be like the people who wanted the supermarket building, and then you're going to be delayed, which isn't going to be good. So in order to protect their families and their own jobs and livelihoods, and possibly their own lives as well, because you don't know what these rich people and that run massive corporations and stuff, supposed to be shady guys, innit? So if you fuck something up for them, I would imagine it seems to be common belief that they'll then fuck up something for you. But they're going to want to protect everyone they know and themselves, so they're probably just going to pour cement around them bones so that the job can be completed and they can still be paid and continue working. Because no one's going to want to ever hire the guy with a reputation of, getting the fucking British Museum on the phone to come to the site and delay the jobs for what they all deem an insignificant discovery. And it kind of is, because we don't seem to actually learn or have learned anything at all from dinosaurs. Like, even the way, right? So this isn't in my notes. I'm going to put a little pin there. The way that we measure the age of a fossil is through something called radiometrics. Now, radiometrics isn't actually a good way of measuring the age of anything. Supposedly, to do radiometric testing, you find the things around the stone, the type of dirt and stones and rock around your fossil, your bone or whatever, your mineral, and then you date them rocks around it, and it's people have come out and said that it's not even likely that this would be real because you've got these different rocks here which show 2 different time zones. But then you've got the idea of, not time zones, but time eras, of build up. But then you've got the idea of the tectonic plates shifting, and that moves rock through rock anyway. So I don't really get what you learn through that. But there isn't actually, from my readings, a decent way to age fossils. Now, people might be going, oh, but you've got carbon dating now. Maybe you do. I don't know anything about that. That wasn't actually mentioned in any of the reading I've done for aging fossils, so it mustn't work for aging fossils. Maybe it works for aging mummies and stuff like that. And weirdly, mummies does come into this episode at some point, but I'll fit it in. But like I said, the most that we did learn from fossils is radiometric testing, which has been now proven not that good to use. It's not that effective. And I know that it's strong to say that we've learnt nothing from them, because potentially we've learnt about dinosaurs and we've learnt a lot about evolution, but we don't seem to have learnt anything from them. They seem to be a very coincidental piece of evidence that came about when the theory of evolution was being peddled. It was a good way of going, oh, they've got the theory of evolution, people don't really believe it, but, well, what if we say that there was these things millions of years ago and that we've all developed from them? And like I said at the top of the show, it's far enough back to still be interesting, and recent enough somehow to still be relevant to our lives. But that's how it's relevant to our lives, because it's linked to evolution. It helped people buy into it, saying, buy into the idea of evolution and dinosaurs, because they could say, look at these monsters that existed long ago, but now they don't. We're what life looks like now. Dinosaurs once ruled the world, and these were monsters, these were massive and evil things. But look at us. We're in charge now. It doesn't always have to be the big scary thing. We are. But anyway, finding dinosaur bones, like they seem to be concentrated, which is odd, because it doesn't make sense that they would have been, like, almost as if they were fucking kept in pens, which is bizarre. But one place where you'll find lots of dinosaurs, or the remains of dinosaurs, Utah. Now, that's a place of significant religious importance in America, I think, and that feels backwards. But what if they make the people of Utah really religious so that they don't go looking for the dinosaurs? Well, what if that was part of the plan all along? We'll say there's dinosaurs here, but then all the people that live here will convince them that dinosaurs don't exist, and that they'll never look for them, because they won't believe they exist, and they won't want people coming and looking for them because it'll disrupt their religion. It makes sense, innit? Like, it's in the best interest of the religious leaders of the area that people don't dig up dinosaurs. Otherwise, their religion would then fall apart potentially, because if creationism wouldn't be relevant, then would it? So, I mean, I don't really know much about, I think it's Mormonism in Mormons in Utah. I don't know a lot about them. I do have the Book of Mormon, though. I'm going to read it. Not the stage play, the actual, a Book of Mormon. Another interesting thing, though, that I discovered is that the first dinosaur to be exhibited, which wasn't really the first dinosaur to be exhibited, because it didn't have any real bones. And I think they constructed the idea from one bone that they'd found underground. So the whole shape of the dinosaur itself was just a guess from biologists and artists. But I mean, that's not interesting. The name of the first dinosaur discovered, though, I found that interesting. The Hadrosaurus, which sounds an awful lot to me, at least like the Hadron Collider. It does, doesn't it? Like, it's bizarre that the first dinosaur has Hadro at the start, and then the Hadron Collider has Hadro at the start, which is another supposedly pivotal thing in science. But then, if you want to link it to mainstream media, mate, Hadrosaurus seems a lot like Hydra from the MCU, from Marvel. The idea, and in Hercules, you've got the Hydra, where it's a lizard, literally like a fucking snake monster with legs, where you cut the head off and more come back. And from this one dinosaur, the Hadrosaurus, they found that and it was dead. It had been killed, like you could say metaphorically, or whatever. It's not there no more. But from that stemmed fucking thousands of others, and it's like a fucking way. It's like an entrance, like a portal in. So through the Hadrosaurus came all these other dinosaurs. So from the Hadron Collider, what's coming from the Hadron Collider? Like, oh yeah, we found the God particle, but then have they actually though? Like, what if it is literally just a portal? Like they practiced it with the dinosaurs, and then all these fossils came through, and these fossils appeared from like the devil or whatever, put them in the ground, and then the Hadron Collider allows other things to come through, slip through the fucking mesh of reality. But like, I mean, other than that though, I don't really know what the link is. I just found it interesting because is the Hadron Collider a way of finding the God particle, or is it actually a way to... What if it's a way to try and fucking refract light to either create invisibility or to ironically see through the ancestors of the ancient lizards' invisibility trick? Maybe that's what it is. The firing fucking light around itself, at itself, or whatever it is they're doing. I don't honestly know. I know they're firing particles at each other, supposedly trying to recreate the Big Bang, which I've never really believed that, because that seems fucking mental. Why the fuck would you want to do that? Create a tiny little universe inside of another universe just seems dangerous. Like, it doesn't sound like a good idea. Again, I'm no scientist, but it doesn't sound like a good idea. Something that constantly forever expands as well, so it's just going to take up our universe. Or maybe live within it, and then universes maybe like rings or donuts or something, or like one of them, like middle-aged women when they do them acrylic paws. Maybe that's what universes are. But it just seems odd. But maybe it's a way to find the invisibility that the lizards were using to be able to hunt the ones that were defensive and protecting their eggs. Maybe that's what they're trying to figure out. Maybe they're trying to use the Hadron Collider to make something that they can shine around and look around and see the invisible things. Maybe, but like, maybe the significance though is simply just the word Hadro, because it's kind of like Hydra in a way, but does Hadro itself have some form of magical significance? Ancient super lizards may have been a fantasy in the 1800s, just like the Hadron Collider plays with science fiction fanatics of today. Honestly, I don't know, but for some reason it just feels really important. Like, it feels really relevant to something. Anyway, the dinosaur heads that we know nowadays, they were created and designed by a sculptor, and the person... Well, so by like a sculptural artist and another person who drew the first iguanodon, which iguanodon, there in a way, sounds like a fancy way of saying lizard king. Iguanodon. Don's like the leader of the mob, the mafia, and then so lizard king. It kind of, there's something there, there must be something. But they got these guys to make this fake head to make the Hadrosaurus seem more believable and complete, whilst no real head is actually known of, which I guess could be because maybe they're like sharks, maybe the head maybe the bodies, well, the head could be made of predominantly cartilage, and maybe they evolved into sharks because they were the best predator, so they became full-on cartilage creatures like a shark with just the teeth, because you'll find shark teeth and shark jaws, like some of the shark jaw anyway, but the rest of it's supposed to be cartilage, so maybe that's what some dinosaur heads were, and that's over millions of years they evolved into full-on bodies of it, with, ironically from the start of the show again, no necks. The shark, I wouldn't really say a shark has a neck, so maybe they developed into that. Maybe they never had actual heads at all. Or all of the bones, though, the real bones that we know of, supposedly they're all hidden away in various vaults around the world that only specific people can access, which seems shady, innit? Supposedly, each of these real bones as well are wrapped up like a mummy. Like, well, in the way that a mummy gets depicted in, like, Scooby-Doo. And I can't help but wonder if there's some significance to this as well, because we see mummies as these weird, decrepit, yet immortal beings. And what if in some way or another, like, dinosaur bones are somehow still alive, or can be rebuilt and brought back to life with some magic or science or the right treatment, or they can regrow into fucking aliens or giants or whatever, you know, if you've just got one, it'll regenerate like a fucking lobster does. Like, what if that's why they want, what if that's what the God particle's for, mate? A way of literally bringing things to life. Like, they find this particle and then they can put it into the dinosaur bone, which isn't actually a dinosaur bone. That's, because it's radioactive, so maybe it's actually a piece of alien. And then by putting the God particle in it, they can bring the alien back to life and maybe garner favour with the aliens that live in the moon, mate. So then the aliens that live in the moon will be like, oh, you've brought back our lizard king, you've brought back the iguanodon, he's safe, we won't destroy your planet, you're fine. And then the fucking one day the moon will just fucking disappear, and then all of the water that's covering the earth will just go down the fucking sinkholes of the earth back inside. But though, then unfortunately, like, the aliens wouldn't have thought of this, though, like, even though they're really clever in that, and I don't doubt the aliens if they are listening, but I think that would then cause, it would either kill all of the dinosaurs, which we've already established though through this that they don't exist, because these bones are actually bits of lizards, actually bits of alien that died here maybe thousands, millions of years ago, but maybe they crashed here, and that could be what the meteorite was. But anyway, that water, back into the earth, and then that water would cause all the fucking, like, the mammoths and the fucking the dinosaurs and according to some people, Nazis and Nazi scientists, to come back out of the hollow earth, and then they're back on the earth, but they'd all be, they'd be washed up on our coasts, like, they'd all be dead because of the flood, apart from, like, fucking, like, is it mosasaurs, which are like an ichthyosaurs or something, like the fucking ones that look like Lapras and the Loch Ness Monster, like, maybe them. Maybe the fucking Loch Ness, like, going back to the Loch Ness episode, we thought maybe that comes from Hollow Earth. Maybe that's where the water, some of the water is left, like, that's where the sinkholes actually are. And then they can remove that, and then that water comes in, and that fucking sort of, through pressure, I don't know, through different pressures being applied, moves the water from the seas back into the Hollow Earth, but also drains Loch Ness. I'm not sure. Like, it's purely conjecture, all of that. That's not really based off of my research. Now, I also learned through my research, though, that only a select few paleontologists are actually allowed to even touch real dinosaur bones. Which, you got to wonder, like, what's the point of their job? Because I know that's strong coming from me. I write fucking stupid books. I make bad taxidermy, like rats into pencil cases and stuff, and most of what I do seems pointless, but I do it to make people laugh, and I never purposely studied to become this. I just fell into it. To become a paleontologist, you've got to study to become a paleontologist. So according to my research, you become a paleontologist, and then you can't really do anything with it. Yeah, you could go to wherever you want and dig up dinosaur bones, because supposedly they're wherever you look for them. They're like fucking Jesus. If you need them, they're there. And that, I can't quite get my head around it. Like, could paleontology just be a way to sell information to people at universities? Again, the idea of, we take intelligent people capable of critical thinking, and then we use universities to fill their heads with dogmatic approaches and fake facts. Like, what sort of fucking scumbag sells fake facts to people? Why would anyone want to divert human knowledge? It's just like, why would anyone read a book full of nonsense, like stuff that doesn't make sense, or stuff that does make sense but isn't true? Like, it's not even a storybook, mate. It's just fucking, like, paleontologist facts. And we've made it all up, but because you all agree with it, that makes it real. What if that's what medicine is like? But you can't really look at that. Like, I don't know why someone would do that. And just as a subtle reminder, my book, The More You Know, is now available to buy, and that is a book of literal fake facts, like, which goes against, I guess, what I've just been saying. but like, at least I'm honest about it. I tell you from the get-go, this is a book of fake facts. In the description on Amazon, it says a book of fake facts. Like, they're not true, innit? Like, but I'm not trying to then sell it as a course at fucking university to people. Anyway, what if the reason behind the heads isn't because, like, the lack of dinosaur heads isn't because of cartilage, but because they've never, they're made of cartilage, and not because they've never found them? What if it's because the heads of dinosaurs are actually like giant humanoid heads? If people are trying to disprove the Bible, then the eradication of the evidence of giants is a fucking great place to start. I went to multiple Catholic schools as a kid, like primary, secondary and college. And I can't remember a fucking single recounting of the Nephilim or of the giants. I didn't find that out until I started going down rabbit holes on fucking YouTube and BitChute and that, and whatever else fucking was available when I was younger. And it makes sense, mate. It makes so much sense that the T-Rex would have a more human-like face, because we're told by biologists that apex predators have front-facing eyes because nothing's hunting them. But what if that's a lie, though? Maybe we are prey for the fucking ever-evolving humanoid lizard species that began its journey to the centre of the Earth approximately 66 million years ago, just to return to the surface as ethereal beings, extra-dimensional ethereal beings that drain our life force. And that's why we've been specifically bred to have forward-facing eyes, so that there is no way at all we could see or even consider or comprehend a ghostly lizard latching onto our spinal chakras to slowly feed off of us and our energy. I mean, overall, like, dinosaurs seem like a pointless lie, innit, unless you're using it to hide something along the lines of an ancient vampiric race that are farming us for their own sustenance. There is a link, though, that exists between giants and dinosaurs, and that link is allegedly National Geographic. They released information about a species of dinosaurs in 1999 called the Archaeoraptor, the supposed missing link, if you like, between dinosaurs and birds, except they used some CT scans a bit afterwards and quickly proved that the evidence that they used for the article was actually forged to fit the narrative. National Geographic then supposedly apologised, and around a year later their article came out about giants, which, again, they came out afterwards then saying that wasn't true either, and it was a hoax, and it was to do with the fucking that photoshopping competition, and that they used pictures from that. So I think the takeaway from this episode should be that we are the takeaway. I reckon it's a safe assumption that dinosaurs went on to evolve into a super advanced form of humanoid. A humanoid we refer to as aliens, as greys, tall whites, or as vampires. Maybe they're all different evolutionary paths of the dinosaurs, but let's focus on the ones that threaten us, like the vampires or the reptilians. Supposedly, like the greys and tall whites don't really offer us any harm. They're just sort of... They're like, the tall whites are supposed to be like kind of protective. The greys work for the various other ones. They're like a clone race. But either way, not about aliens this week. So, like, they're believed, or the vampires, the reptilians are believed to farm humans, even though they closely resemble humans themselves. So maybe that's why we eat the animals that we eat, like a cow, chicken, fish, a pig. None of these really, ducks, I've already said chickens, innit? But none of these will really resemble people in any way, shape or form. Like chickens, yeah, they've got 2 feet. Pigs kind of could look like a person if you stood them on a back legs or something, but then again, so would a bear if you shaved it, but then they've got the snouts, and none of them look like people. So maybe that in itself is a way to brainwash us into thinking nothing will farm us because we don't look like farmyard creatures, if that makes sense. Except we know that dinosaurs used to eat other dinosaurs, and they're all believed to have had very similar faces and heads, meaning they looked alike. Maybe it's a very, very subtle way of preparing people for being harvested for their meat or their lives or their blood by a very human-looking predator. And it would also explain all of the stuff on the internet about rich people being fucking associated with reptilian alien overlords and then partaking in the consumption of human blood. But who knows, mate? Who knows, really? Like, what do you reckon? Do you reckon dinosaurs are real? Do you reckon they existed? Like, fucking get in the Discord and let me know what you think about it, innit? And I reckon, honestly, mate, that's probably all the time I've got for the show today. I may have even gone over a little bit. I hope that's okay. I hope you're hearing this. And anyway, I'm the world around you, and this was Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. I'll see you tomorrow on Truth Seeking with Jimmy Budd on Threshold FM at 7 o'clock tomorrow, Thursday. And later tonight, we've got HDR at 5, and Jimmy Budd's back on at 7. Or fucking see you in a bit, guys.